if I worked with you, if I worked for you, if you worked for me, we would each see a kind of a different facet of a person.
Yes.
If we were in an intimate relationship, if we were friends, if we were in a church together, each of those, if you were the priest, each of those kind of roles shows us a different aspect of a person.
Got you.
And so the more joined up we are in our emotions internally, the more we are integrated, because you're very much into personal development, the more we own our feelings.
Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Greetings and salutations, folks. It's Audley Stevenson back for another edition of the most audacious podcast the internet has to offer. This is the Audacious Living Podcast, and I appreciate you for being here as we continue our ongoing goal of helping our listeners live their best audacious lives ever. As always, I encourage you to connect with us through our social media channels. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook under the handle The Audacious Pod. And then if you head over to our YouTube channel, or if you're watching this episode on YouTube, then you know you can kindly hit the notification bell down below. Ding, ding, ding. And that way you're connected to all great things Audacious related. So like, follow, subscribe, share, tell a friend, all would be appreciated. Now, the process of introspection is a reflective journey in which we look inwards to examine our conscious thoughts, emotions, and feelings. Now, introspection can be very, very helpful in helping to raise our self-awareness and how we see ourselves and how in terms of fitting into the grand scheme of things. By increasing our awareness of oneself, we put ourselves on a path to that life that's well lived that we all desire to have. Now, introspection is a topic of conversation on this edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. And I got Wendy Nash joining me to lend her expertise and knowledge on the analyzation of within, if you will. Wendy joins me all the way from Australia, where she's a meditation coach who works with CEOs to help them identify their blind spots and the different areas of improvement that exist for them. And again, introspection is the key to help us identify those areas and those blind spots. We really had a delightful chat, and it was all sorts of insights that I really, really think you'll appreciate. So we've got the stage set, we've got you all ready to go, and it's now time to turn things over to my conversation with Wendy Nash. Enjoy. Wendy, for being here with me on the Audacious Living Podcast. It's such a pleasure to spend some time, and you're joining me all the way from Australia.
I am. I've actually just moved into north, so I've moved about 1,000 kilometers north, and it's a lot warmer, which is great because I've just heard that Sydney is absolutely freezing at the moment, so I am delighted. And I wanted to say thank you very much for having me on your show. It is really, it's just so lovely to have the opportunity to share what I've got and what I've learned along the way. Yes. But before we just start with the conversation, I do really like to acknowledge that this is Aboriginal country and that this particular nation I'm on is Gubbi Gubbi country. I think it's really important to know where we've come from in order to know where we're going. And, you know, these people took care of our country for 70,000 years. Yes. And in something like 250 years, we've managed to really trash it rather spectacularly. So I want to honour the capabilities and commitment to country that Aboriginal people have had for all this time. I think it's a pity we haven't learnt. So I just wanted to.
Well, so thank you, and thank you. I think it was a very important acknowledgement, so I appreciate you doing that. And thank you again for being here and sharing. And you're absolutely right. Life offers us so many great lessons and so many great learnings. And I truly believe, and really one of the foundational principles of this podcast is taking what we know and sharing it with others. It's really about sharing. And if a person listening to our conversation today walks away with just one thing, then I'm delighted. And they take that one thing and make them better, that's even more delightful. So thank you. What a great way to start off. My goodness. Thank you, Wendy. That's awesome.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
You spend a lot of time in the area of introspection. And helping people to understand a little bit of self before you can go out and make an impact and impact others. I wonder if we sort of can start there, and maybe that's our starting point as to, so when did you recognize or realize that was an important place to sort of put your flag and mark your work, if you will?
Well, I haven't been asked that question before. So when did I start? I kind of never thought I was introspective until I realized that no one else was doing it.
We're all in the same boat.
And it's more that I remember when I was a teenager, I expected that I would get married and have kids and things. Right. And my eldest brother, he really took on that parent role for me. And he said, well, if you don't want to make the same mistakes that our parents made with us, you have to figure out where those mistakes happened. Now, I took that advice. Unfortunately, he didn't. But I figured out that I needed to work on myself before I kind of ricocheted that further. And I'd also observed that when we don't, like, we have ideas of ourselves, like you have an idea of yourself.
Sure.
And how you speak and how you come across. And then you see yourself on the video or an audio or in an interview, and you're like, oh, okay.
You're cringing, right? You're like, oh.
Totally. I did one the other day. I did an interview the other day, and I'm like, wow, I come across as really cold and aloof. Oh, this is not a good look.
I have a hard time seeing that, Wendy. Come on, I don't know. Cold? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. But, well, there you go. So each person sees us really differently.
Yes.
Yeah. And we're kind of, the way I think of it is, I'm sort of digressing. So you can see I kind of meander off in all sorts of different directions. Okay. But I sort of think of each person as like a disco ball that, you've got this internal workings of the mind, and each person you interact with is like sees a little mirror. So I see a little mirror of you, and you see a little mirror of me, and we can't get out of our mirror image. And according to the light and everything like that, changes how we see. So in this instance, where we're having an interview and this is lovely. And if I met you in a basketball match, that would be really different. If I'm going to say something perhaps a bit controversial, but you're probably much taller than me, much bigger than me. And if I saw you walking down the street, I would invariably cross the road, just because for my own personal safety, I just always cross the road. Pretty much everybody I will cross the road for, just because I've had some bad experiences. And so my training is that. And so if I worked with you, if I worked for you, if you worked for me, we would each see a kind of a different facet of a person. Yes. If we were in an intimate relationship, if we were friends, if we were in a church together, each of those, if you were the priest, each of those kind of roles shows us a different aspect of a person.
Got you.
And so the more joined up we are in our emotions internally, the more we are integrated, because you're very much into personal development, the more we own our feelings and our ideas and our gaps. Like the other day when I kind of reflected on how I came across as aloof and superior and cold, lots of people, lots of colleagues have seen me like that, actually, and they've said that. And it was in that interview, I was a little bit afraid of that interviewer.
Okay.
And so I could see that I was actually afraid of him. And so then I became quite cold and aloof. So this is very, but with you, you've got this lovely, warm personality that's very friendly and low key. And so you're seeing a different facet of my personality. And if I was not so well joined up on my introspection, if I wasn't capable of kind of allowing myself to have both realities, I would have been like, I am not a cold aloof person. He's the fault.
It's all him. Right.
It's all him, right? But it was really good because I was like, and then I was able to really kind of inquire, well, what am I not seeing about this? This is like my favorite introspection question, is what am I not seeing about this? And then it started to go, well, I'm actually afraid of this person. And I'm often afraid in groups. And so in a work situation, I'm quite socially, it's one thing to go to a party and, all the rest, but there's another thing at work where you've got the same kind of people at work, but you don't necessarily feel at ease. You're not at friends. You don't have anything in common with them.
Right.
So I'm quite afraid of a lot of people. And that's what people had been seeing in me all this time. And so I was afraid, and then I was able to really engage with these real deep social fears that I have. So I hope that answers the question.
No, it does. And you've opened up all sorts of wonderful doors. I'm going to try to walk through every single one of them. I love the disco ball analogy, right? And the different pieces that make us all up, and understanding that we are made up of there's different elements that make up who we are. And oftentimes the environment that we're in that helps influence that, and what brings, the certain things out of us. That's all okay. And I see it. So where the introspection piece comes in is being able to recognize that, and being able to recognize in what realms, what areas, or what zones, when I'm doing certain things, what comes out of me and when. And so I'll tell you a quick story. So my 15-year-old son, he said to me one day, he goes, do you want to, young lady interest that he was interested in. He said, I want to see this girl play basketball. And so I said, sure, I'll take you to the game. And, as a father, I'm like, oh, this is kind of cool. My son let's give it a shot. Let's see how it goes. So I take him to this basketball game, and he sees this girl that he's interested in. And she'd asked him to come, and he was there. And after the game, she was off kind of, with her friends, and he and I were sitting there, and I said, why don't you go tell her she had a great game, go and talk to her. And he was kind of like, he was really, recoiled and was really shy. And my son plays a lot of basketball, and on the court, he is loud. He's into the game. He's all, his energy, he's fired up. And so when I'm encouraging him, hey, why don't you go talk to her and tell her a good game and tell her you enjoyed watching. And he's like, yeah, I'm kind of shy. And I said, well, if you were on a basketball court, you'd have no problem doing this. And he goes, that's because I'm on the court, Dad. It's different. And so the example of being in different places brings out different things out of you. And that's really where I was going with my long-winded story about my son.
No, it's a great story, and it's so perfect. And we can think that, we really identify with one particular thing. So I didn't identify with the fact that I came across as cold and aloof, but that's what people were seeing of me. And I was sort of, people who like me tell me I'm warm and funny and all this sort of stuff. But of course, my family don't think that. My family think I'm difficult and all the rest. And I don't really understand what they're saying. But again, it is all these different things. So yeah, definitely.
No, and they make up who we are, and I think it's okay to have those different sides, and it's okay to, because I think that builds the layers of who we as individuals, and I think we all, you've got, I don't think you can always be one way all the time, I guess is really what my initial thinking is, right?
You cannot be one way all the time. So if you don't mind, I just kind of so if you think, when you were a little baby, you were quite different to who you are now.
Right.
And Right. And then 5 years old and 10 years old, 15, 20, and up to all these years. And then when you're with your partner or with your son or with whoever, each of these situations changes us very slightly. And so you can never repeat who you are entirely. You might have recurring habits, but it's never exactly the same, ever. It's like, you play lots of basketball, but each match is different because you've got different team players, you've got a different coach, you're in a different, what do you call a basketball?
Court?
Arena, thank you. I was going to say field. No, I was going, no, I think that's called grass.
No problem. They have outdoor courts, so you're fine.
I'm fine. I think it's really important to be open to being wrong. So I'll connect in that with that because actually you're always in a state of flux and change and things. And even though my family might want to say, oh, well, you're really difficult, or my colleagues say you're cold, and my partner says you're lovely generally. But nonetheless, we are always in a state of flux and change. These conditions never repeat themselves. You're only ever doing anything for the first time in this moment. So there is only this moment.
Oh, I love the way you said that. I love the way you said you're only ever doing something for the first time in this moment. Oh, I love that.
I'm glad. So now you know a lot about basketball.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah. All right. So I'm going to put you on the spot here.
Okay. Oh, boy.
Okay. All right. So if you were to think, because I think this is really speaks to that thing about how everything changes all the time.
Okay.
If you were to think about, so you know lots about basketball. If you were to think about how much in the whole wide world you know about basketball, absolutely, like everything on a percentage scale, how much do you know? Like 100%, 10%, 50%, 25%, 2%, 1%? What would be the scale of basketball that you know?
I would say a solid 80%. Leaving some room for, and this is how much I know, right? Like you're saying, how much about the game that I know?
You know, and sort of compared to the whole big wide world.
Oh, okay. Oh, maybe a bit higher than I would say. I would say a bit higher. I'd say, let's say close to 90% then. If we're comparing to the whole world, yes.
Okay. So I wasn't comparing compared to other people, but more. So most people in their big chosen field, they usually say to between 2 and 5%. By the time you've thought about all the different players and coaches and people and stadiums and everything like that.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah, and the balls and the equipment and everything like that. Chances are you're probably going to know about 2 to 5%. You can be, I was not very good in my questioning, that you can be 100% sure that you absolutely can unequivocally say, this is absolutely true.
I understand. Sorry.
That was I forgot to put that in. Sorry about that.
No worries. Okay, I follow.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. So if you were to kind of say, okay, a good guess. So, okay, of that, 100% unequivocal. What would be the percentage, do you reckon?
Okay, so you clarified that.
Yeah,
I would put myself somewhere. I'm thinking between 8 and 10% is sort of that range I'm hovering now. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And then you've probably, you're pretty experienced, and you know quite a lot of people, a lot of places, and you've seen a lot of arenas and everything.
Right.
So you would have a good guess for maybe not 100% sure, but maybe 75, 80% sure. What would you say your kind of good hunch gut instinct for? Another 20, 30, 40, 50%?
Say 20, I'm thinking is 20.
Okay. So out of that, you're about 30%. And I'm not, this is a high level of competence, I would say 30%. Yeah. All right.
Okay.
which means that there's a really good chance that 70% of the time you're wrong, actually. It's really interesting to look at it from that perspective. So if you think, well, I should have got it right because I knew what to do and I knew everything like that. Actually, that's not true, because there are all these things that are coming into the mix.
Absolutely. No, you're right.
Because it's the first time you've ever done it.
No, you're right.
Because these conditions are coming together for the first time ever. And there was a good guess that you'd be 30% right, but there's 70% chance that you were going to get it wrong. And I think, I was really self-righteous and I was really determined to be right. Once I realized I knew kind of 1% of anything,
right,
then I was just like, well, why would I expect that I would be right? Because basically it's a really good chance of being wrong. So
it's a great analogy. I actually heard a saying recently where every single one of us out there, we all have something that we believe wholeheartedly in that we're absolutely wrong about. Absolutely.
I would say, and more than one thing.
Yeah. That's right. So that speaks to your point that you made, just in terms of what we think. And I think in order for us to understand that or even accept that, we've got to be able to look within ourselves and say, that introspective journey, which isn't easy for a lot of people. And I would imagine you've run into a fair amount of individuals who, don't want to take that journey.
Yeah, look, not everybody has the capacity. So I have a friend and she has a disability. She was part of collecting children who had been abused and neglected, and by our social services team. And she had 5 strokes. So her brain is quite nuked. And she doesn't have the capacity to introspect because her brain is nuked in that regard. And a lot of people don't have an inclination. It's just not their bag.
Right.
And, there's a part of me that goes, at some level, I think the yearning to introspect, the capacity to introspect, is a bit like it's something we're born with. Right. Like it's no different to the color of our skin or how tall we grow or how big we grow, or whether we're sporty types or whether we're intellectual types or whatever.
But it still can be learned though, right?
It can, but you've got to have the yearning to do that. And I think it's that yearning, as one of my teachers says, some people have the enlightenment drive, not everybody has it. And so sort of within that, definitely.
Got you. Understood. So when we talk about introspection, I think an important part of that is so we talk about enlightenment to our own blind spots, because we've all got things that we don't necessarily see or not in our view, and we just sometimes they gotta be brought and put in front of us by others and say, here you go, look, it's right in front of you, before you actually see it. Sort of talk about that process, about navigating to find those blind spots. What's that like?
Yeah, so I think it's easier than it seems. Okay. Like by nature, we think that blind spots are impossible to see, because they are. But I'm going to go into a part of the mind. So first I want to talk about the difference between introspection and introversion. Okay. That's just my own kind of thing. Sure. People conflate the two, and people say that people who are shy or, some people are very sociable and that's extroversion, and some people are sort of withdrawn and that's introversion. Mm-hmm. I think I have a friend and he says the person who makes the first bid for contact is invariably an extrovert. And I thought that's a really good way of putting it. Okay. It's somebody who seeks to connect. I get that. And I think I would put that. I say that because a lot of extroverts like me, there's this whole idea that I'm supposed to love socializing and parties and things, and I really hate socializing and parties, and I'm not a night owl, I'm not, all that sort of stuff. So I kind of bristle at that one. So I just want to sort of put it out there that
I'm actually not far off from you. I very much love being at home and love winding down. And I think for me, because while I'm out, there's so much of this, hey, that it takes your energy. And I feel coming home is a great way to recharge. And so I'm okay. I love it, actually.
Totally. So I just wanted to clarify that is a confusion that people have, that I separate them, but some people don't. So basically, it's kind of easy. Think of like what I do is I think of a problem. Mm-hmm. So I had a funny interaction with somebody in my meditation class last night.
Okay.
And something was really triggered in my body. So I know there's something's up, and I, she said this and then this and that, and I've got all that kind of stuff going. But there is something, it's not as useful to blame her as it is for me to go, well, what am I not seeing about this?
Right.
So if I just sit there, and so I meditate, I've been meditating for 20 years. Mm-hmm. But you can do this going for a run, or you can go for a match, or clean the house, whatever it is, something, that takes your mind off it. But if you just go, bring the problem to mind, like this interaction that I had with this woman, and then what am I not seeing about that? And just let it cook, because there's two parts to the mind. One is this. So last year I had half a day where I was enlightened like the Buddha. It was really cool.
Okay.
So, but I only had it for half a day, I'm not Eckhart Tolle,
Right.
But it was really cool because it helped me see what the mind is like. And so there's this awareness. And I think often most religions would call that God, or awareness, or something like that. Mm-hmm. And it's where there's this basic unjudgmental part of the mind. It's a really open, spacious, connecting part of the mind.
Right.
But then there's this other social barricaded kind of part of the mind, which is the one which says, I'm a good person, and it's not me, it's them. I'm a good person, I'm right, it's like this. So, and that voice, what I've noticed about that voice is it's often like a primary school kid. I always feel like I'm 7 years old. No, it's not true. They were mean to me. And that's usually, I'm like, yeah, okay. So I know that there's some kind of social thing happening here.
Right.
So it's like, by asking that question, what am I not seeing about this? That social I'm good voice has something to do, because it sort of can't answer the question, what am I not seeing about this? It's like giving you put butter on a cat's paws or something like that, when you're moving house. And it's just so distracts it. Then it gives the chance for this kind of natural awareness, this wisdom, this better part of us to come forward with an answer. I haven't quite got there yet with this person because it's too soon, but that is how I do it. And it's just really, and once I've seen through that, then next time I have an interaction which is a bit funny, I'm not hijacked by it. So it still arises, but I don't have that pit in my stomach, which I do kind of at the moment a little bit, just because it's left over from last night, despite how lovely and charming you are. So yeah.
Understood. No, I understand. And I get that. I understand that those things it certainly can happen. I can see how easily it can happen. I just, again, for me, I'm just fascinated with blind spots, because when your eyes get open, you're like, oh my gosh, like it was that thing in front of me all the time. And so that's the part that always, and I think you have to be okay with checking yourself, so to speak, right? And once you are, then you're open to everything else and come your way. As at least that's the way I see it, right?
Totally, because this is this integration part of us, you know, because for as long as you blame everybody else as the problem, well, you kind of can't fix it. So you stay in that blind spot forever. Right. It's like, you know, you're playing basketball and somebody says, you know, maybe the coach or the umpire. Is it called an umpire? So
the coach or the ref.
Completely baseball. So my knowledge about basketball is about, you know, 0.0001% of all basketball in the world. Okay.
Understood.
So, but nonetheless, we can really converse. You really get what I'm saying. So it doesn't matter if my words are off. No. You actually really get it. Right. But so which says something about the desire for humans to connect and to understand each other. We have this deep yearning to understand each other. This is this real wise introspective thing, which unfortunately gets kind of interfered with by that voice, which is the social mind wanting us to be good. Right. But the yearning to connect is really, really there.
Gotcha.
And now I've kind of gone. So if the coach and the ref are saying, no, you need to do it that way. And as a player, you're going, no, it's not fair. They're against me. No. You're not learning. You're not improving. You're not becoming a better person.
I love it. No, I do. I love it. I think you're absolutely right. When you're resistant or you're pushing back or you're not listening, you're not open to listening, you're absolutely right. That stunts your growth, that, you know, halts your development overall, and you don't expand. And so I'm really glad that you touched on that point. The other point that we've sort of touched on, alluded to, but I want to kind of zero in on is the feedback of others, right? Those that can see us in our fulsome selves, as opposed to the limited view that we oftentimes have, and how important that is. You know, so you just gave the example where the coach sees something and, you know, that player goes, well, no. Well, it can happen in other, not just in that arena or realm, whether in the business world, a manager to employee, a relationship, you know, between spouses, friends, whatever, you know, these things can take place. But it's really interesting, because there is a part where you don't want your actions to be guided by the opinions of others, right? You want to be yourself, and, you know, and behave, you know, as yourself, and not let, you know, someone's opinion or viewpoint alter or make that be different. But at the same time, there is just some value in what they're able to see in you. So it's almost like you're taking what you get from other people with a grain of salt, so to speak.
Yeah, in Tibetan Buddhism, they have this really fantastic slogan, and it's, of the two witnesses, trust the principal one. And what that means is, you know yourself, what is the right thing. You get feedback from others, but you know when you're conning yourself, don't you? You know when you're just like, you know, there's a bit of BS happening, you know, it's like, I'm kidding myself, you know. So there is that.
One thing that I absolutely want you to speak to is your brand, you know, cutting the BS. Like, or cutting the crap, rather, I think what it is, and that's your website. And explain that for our listeners, if you don't mind, Wendy.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. So,
and it's on your mug, by the way, too. I saw that.
Yeah. Look, I've got to do a bit of branding. That's how it goes.
Kindly cut the crap.
Basically, as you will gather, I'm a pretty straight to the point kind of person.
Yes, you are.
So that is my style. And then when I was thinking about what will I call the company, I like Cut the Crap, but I felt it was too blunt. And so I got Kindly, because we've sort of talked a little bit about introspection, but the really important thing that is the essence of everything is to be kind to yourself, kind to others, to look for kindness around you. So when someone gives you something like food, you know, makes food or goes shopping, to really appreciate the time and effort that the thoughtfulness that somebody has taken in order to provide that for you. So it's very important to look for the kindness that is around everywhere. And kindly also means please, like I like our double entendre, double meaning words. So and it alliterates nicely, and it's very memorable. People, once they've heard it once, they never forget. So that's why I do that.
Yeah,
but
yeah. No, it makes total sense. I like the double entendre is a great one. But it's the idea of being straight to the point and being direct. You can't get better. You can't improve. You can't be, this, we talk oftentimes about this, this audacious life that we're striving for. You can't have that audacious life if you're not cutting straight to the chase and going directly to the core of the issue that needs to be addressed or whatever. And so I think there's great value in doing that.
Yeah, like I think it can be a little bit confronting for people, like
I get it.
I've been doing this for 20 years. And when I was in the beginning, I was really prickly and really, like, I used to have a really bad temper. I used to have a fierce, I used to, like, almost anger management stuff,
Got you.
And I was so delighted because I looked at it and I looked at it and I looked at it and I stopped myself and I really, cut to the chase of it. I really kind of, it was hard. I had to train myself.
Yes.
And then a couple of years ago, when the pandemic first arrived, it was March 2020.
Yes.
And I was in Amsterdam on a meditation retreat.
Okay.
And they just said, I'm sorry, we're going to have to cut the retreat short, and you're going to have to all go home because you can't get there unless you get a plane, and they're stopping the planes. And I looked around and I went, I'm not the angriest person in the room here. This is really cool. And I was talking about it with a friend of mine who I'd only known a couple of years. And we were going for a walk in the forest nearby. And I said, wow, I'm not the angriest person in the room. And he said, you angry? And it was like, hallelujah, I have done it. It took me 15 years.
That's amazing.
But if I hadn't taken that real drive to change the behavior, I would still be prickly. I'm still right. Prickly. Still, because, like that cut the crap, that is a very sharp, there's an edge to that, you know. And so I've had to hone that as to figure out when is it okay to say that and when is it not. And I'm not always right. And I have to, when people go, ouch, then I have to learn from that. And that's kind of what I saw with that conversation with the woman last night, is that I just sort of thought, ouch. And she has that same tendency as well. So it kind of jars. But if she's still at that blamey stage where she thinks I'm the problem, as opposed to it's her mind and what's going on in her mind. So you definitely have to just own it. The more you own, the more you take responsibility, the less you blame. Really, you can transform your whole mind. It's amazing. It's amazing.
That's where the real work lies, though, Wendy, and it's not the easiest thing to do for people to be able to get real and honest with themselves, because that's what they've got to do. And as you said, they do have to cut the crap and get direct, kindly cut the crap and get directly to the core. What would you say is kind of a starting point for individuals? What does that look like?
Well, I think that when you have a problem, you bring it to mind, ask yourself, what am I not seeing about this problem? Go for a run, clean the house, whatever. That's a really good one. Actually, I don't know, this is probably sort of, this more than me, but if you drink 2 liters of water a day, so I think a liter is about a quart. Okay. If you drink 2 liters of water a day, that is the single best way of lifting your spirits. Oh. Kind of crazy. So I just, I've got 2 mugs. I'm cheating. So I've got one for the tea and one for the hot water. But basically, each one of these is 250 mils. And I just put 4 of them in, I've got a flask here. So I just fill up that, and I do that twice a day and have it in front of me. And then you've seen me drink all throughout this interview.
Yes.
And then at the end of the day, I've drunk 2 liters, and it also does help me reduce my anxiety, make me feel better. There's something about not feeling like I'm in a desert, which is really, really important for well-being. There's tons of research. So if you don't do anything else, just that one. And if you want to really figure out kind of where you're crashing and burning in life, that question, what am I not seeing about that? What am I not seeing about this problem, is definitely the thing. What have you found helpful in your in your work as a basketball or other area that you found really helpful?
I've always been a big fan of stockpiling my wins. I keep record of sort of the good stuff that I do. I've got a podcast with over 100 episodes, and I've talked to some fascinating people. Well, that's really helpful for when I'm going through whatever in that moment. I can go, yeah, but I remember one time I talked to Wendy and she told me this and I agreed with her. And so, stuff like that is extremely helpful, because I think the more you store up and the more you have that you can refer to, almost kind of like your Rolodex, right? You're like, yeah, or whether I find kind of inspiration or motivation, or just a reminder of kind of my greatness. And I say that not from a place of arrogance, but just a real place of honesty about sort of who I am and being comfortable with who I am and confident about that individual. So I've listened, Wendy, I have my moments as well where I don't feel I am where I'm not where I should be. And I have to just kind of remind myself kind of, hey, like, is this the audacious life you're trying to live? Like, I spend so much time encouraging this in other people. How is it permeating in my own life? And so, I have my down moments, but they're not very long. We use the analogy of the hills and the valleys, right? And so I oftentimes will talk to people and say, there's nothing wrong with being down. There's nothing wrong with being angry, upset, disappointed, whatever those negative emotions might feel in that moment, but you don't have to stay there. And there's always reason to come out of it. And so, yeah, that's, again, I've been doing this for a little while. And so it's helpful when you store up that, you've got that, that resume behind you, if you will. But absolutely, I think that's been helpful for me, for sure.
Yeah. And actually it makes me think about, I touched on it before. Another thing that people can do is also to recognize the acts of generosity and kindness that people do for you.
Yeah.
Like, I
brings out so much good stuff, doesn't it? It really does.
Like if your son your son introduced you to his kind of sweetheart, this girl.
Yeah.
And there's something really beautiful about that act of generosity. If you didn't have a good relationship, he's not going to show you.
Right.
So, so there's something really beautiful about his extending kind of his inner thought, his shyness with you, and his tenderness with you. It's a real act of generosity and kindness that he's willing to come forward in that way with you.
Wendy, that's such a wonderful point, when people are willing to show them their true selves to you. And that's really a gift that they're giving, because once you bare yourself, you're showing your all. I've never thought of it from a kindness lens, but I definitely do see it. Absolutely.
So if you stockpile all these kind of ways that people are kind to you, make you your coffee in the morning, breakfast, go shopping, grocery shopping, or perhaps somebody, somebody says, oh, you should get this kind of microphone, down at the store or something like that. That's actually a really good microphone. Then, maybe they're doing a sales pitch, but they're actually going, I want you and your listeners to have a good experience.
Yeah.
And so there's something about coming forward as an act of generosity in that moment. obviously there are hard sales people and all the rest.
Sure.
And
Oh, sure.
But when you feel like it's genuine, it's really beautiful that somebody was actually willing to come forward and kind of think, actually, I want you to have a good experience here.
Wow. I love it. Oh, I love it. I love it. Wendy, talk about how important balance is in our lives. I think that's another part of the work that you do in helping people to find balance, right? And I think some of the things that we talked about certainly are aspects to get there, but let's zero in on that a little bit.
So I think it's a lot about awareness of your body.
Oh, good point. Yeah.
Like you spoke before about when you're, one day somebody might tell you something and you're okay with it. Then another time somebody might tell you and you're really pissed off or whatever.
Sure. Yeah.
And basically, if you find yourself getting a bit crisp or a bit whatever, chances are there's some resentment. So often I find that when people use the word, they're not dedicated enough, that's a sign that you're living a life that is out of balance, because that's another way of saying, I'm resentful about how much I'm doing compared to what you're doing. I mean, maybe in certain, like, I'm used to speaking with people who have staff or something.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm not talking about maybe basketball players and they're not kind of doing what they need to do. So I'm not talking about that, because that's a skill. Yes. And that needs a certain level of training. And yes. If people aren't dedicated to it, then that's a problem, because then that lets everybody else down. But I'm talking more in a work context where people feel, the boss is working all hours or something and expecting staff to do the same. And, if it's your company, there's no one else is going to be as hardworking as you are.
Correct.
So, and I would say that that's a cue to look at your own life.
Yes.
And notice that maybe you need to take a step back. If you're snapping at people, if people are like, wow, you're hard work at the moment, you notice people are avoiding you. And to become more aware of our words.
Yes.
Really becoming aware of our words. Definitely. And I can give you some meditation hints, which take no time out of your day.
Yeah, that's good. And I think that's good, because things that you can do quickly, and some people's lifestyles are go, and so things that you can do, because it's interesting. Meditation, I think oftentimes there's a misconception that it's this big production that you've got to have a designated space, wearing certain clothes, certain type of shoes, or not shoes, or whatever. And it's none of those things at all, right?
No, I mean, if you think about it, in most countries where Buddhism has been really big, and not everybody meditates, it's not so many people meditate, but nonetheless, they're agrarian communities. They're grindingly poor communities, and they just have to sit where they sit, actually. Yes. And they are busy people. They have to get up and work all day and then crash into bed. They have to deal with failing crops and babies that die and relatives and demands and landlords and all this sort of stuff. They do not have to worry about having the right clothes in the right place. That's not high on their list,
You nicely put in perspective. That's great.
And it's got nothing to do with any of that. So it's very similar to what we're talking about. It's about sort of becoming aware of what's going through your mind, not having a particular experience. So what did I hear? Something the other day recently, it was the wise are noticing the experiencing they are having. They are not chasing a particular experience. So that's the difference, I would say. But here's I'm going to give you a few meditation hints that just are very, very quick.
Okay.
All right. So one is a breathing exercise. And this is, I think, more a yoga one, but it's really good for people if they have a meeting they're going into and they're a bit nervous.
Okay.
Or perhaps before a match or whatever. And you just breathe in for the count of 4, hold for 2, and then breathe out for the count of 6. And we'll do it 3 times. So just breathe in for the count of 4, hold for 2, and then breathe out for the count of 6. And breathe in for 4. Hold for 2, and then breathe out for the count of 6. And one more time. How do you feel in your body and mind?
As especially as you're breathing out, you feel that just it's like a release, and it's just very, very loose, and it's like you're letting everything flow out. Is sort of the feeling I had.
So that one, apparently, look, I'm not a breathing specialist, and I'm not a, but what I've heard is that the in-breath is what triggers the sympathetic nervous system. So that's what brings arousal.
Okay.
Then, and that will also trigger fear and anxiety. So that brings you up. The hold for 2 is to slow down the heart. It uses up the oxygen that's there. Okay. And then the out for 6 is triggering the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the calming system, which you have rightly said is you just feel like you're releasing everything. So that's that. So that took like what, 30 seconds?
Right. That's right. That's exactly.
You can do that. You can do that when you're driving, getting really head up with all the traffic, whatever. Absolutely. So that's nothing. Another meditation practice that you can do is when you're, I like this one. This is called leave no trace. Okay. So as you go through the day, so you might get a cup of coffee and then you might put it in the sink to be done later, to be washed up later. Yep. Yes. Instead of putting it in the sink, you just get the cloth, you wash it, you get the tea towel, you dry it, you put it away. And then you always have a lovely clean kitchen. If you brush your teeth, then you wipe down the basin afterwards, then you always have a lovely clean basin. If you have a shower, you wipe down all the water and you clean it. It just takes a couple of minutes. By the end of the time, you're not as wet, so your towel doesn't get so drenched. Yes. You've cleaned the shower, you've stopped the mold from building up, and you're ready, you're sort of half dry already. And the combination of doing all these leave no trace meditations is that when you get to the weekend, you don't look around the house going, oh my goodness, this is one huge pigsty I've created. That's right. That's right. So that's a really nice way to make your daily life much nicer.
And what I like about that one is you're always coming back to that clean basin, right? As you articulated. So it's just really a nice feeling to always walk into versus, oh, I've got to clean this, or oh, this is a mess. So I like that one a lot, actually.
Yeah. And so just to be aware of the mind which goes, oh, I'll do it later, and just to notice that and then recognize, allow it to exist, and then get the tea towel anyway and then put it away. So that's another one. Another one is when you're walking. So if you've got to walk from, I think Americans are big car users. So if you walk from the car to the house, or if you have a room in the house which has maybe got like a corridor or a foyer or somewhere like that, where you're crossing it all the time. As you leave one room and you cross this room, this corridor, whatever it is, hall, and you go into the other one, just notice as you step on that floor, kind of what the foot is doing. And it's quite good because the feet are bare usually at home, whereas out in the shop, if you're outside, that's not the case. Right. But that's quite nice just to feel the sensation of the floor and the body moving, actually. So that's quite a nice one.
That's a connecting piece, right? Like especially when you're bare feet, you feel it. It's a way of connecting, right?
Yeah, and that's a really good one for people who like people who care for small kids. So because it's so crazy when you have kids, the only way to find some sanity is just to kind of feel a bit more grounded. So that's a really good one for feeling more grounded.
Gotcha.
And another one is when you get your cup of tea or water or whatever it is, cup of coffee, is just to become aware when you touch it, what is the sensation like? Like here, I've got my mug, it's quite smooth and it's warm. It's actually very pleasant. So that's a really, and it's just to bring you back to here.
Got you. Stop. I think of the idea of stopping and smelling the roses, right? And appreciating that moment, right? Not taking it for granted.
Totally. And as I said before, the sort of receiving gracefully one, which I think is, what's his name? Rogers, Mr. Rogers. Yeah. So Fred Rogers.
Yes.
He talks about that. He talked about that. There was an interview with, I think it's Charlie Rice.
Okay.
And he talked about the importance of receiving gracefully. And if you receive gracefully every single time someone does something for you, you will find that your relationships are much better because people go, oh, I feel so appreciated.
Yes. Yeah. I can see that. Absolutely. It's a great point.
And I don't feel so disappointing because, you know, so often I feel like, oh, did I do the right thing? But if you just, you know, if you have all these, like, I received it really gracefully, then that offsets the times when you go, actually, I would have really liked you to have done X, Y, Z. It's no big problem, but I sort of feel a bit disappointed because you've got all these other really beautiful, genuine ways that you've appreciated the person. That sense of being disappointing isn't breaching the relationship. It's actually strengthening it because you're kind of going, right, let's have an honest relationship where everything is welcome. Everyone is welcome.
Oh, wow. Well, those are some great meditation techniques. Certainly, and they're very quick and easy.
I've got one more.
Okay.
I've got one more. Okay. So when you get into bed at night, and this is what I do with clients who aren't used to meditating and have a really crazy mind. And I do this for the first week. And you get into bed, you turn your phone on to airplane mode, you set a timer for 60 seconds, and you just notice the breath. You just notice the breath moving, the body moving. That's all you're doing for 60 seconds. Okay. And then the following week, 2 minutes. The following week, maybe 2 minutes, maybe 3 minutes. Right. And it sounds like 2 minutes, it's nothing. Right. I can do that. But it's kind of like you'll find you're going off in all sorts of different directions. There's no two ways about it. There's no two ways. And what you can do is kind of in that moment, if you start to get a bit bored with the breath, because I personally find the breath ones really, really boring, is I start to think about all the lovely, I go through the day 24 hours beforehand and I go, what was I doing this time yesterday? And then I kind of go, okay. And then my partner made me dinner and he actually bought me a bunch of flowers last night. So that was really lovely because I was feeling a bit flat about something yesterday. So it was really lovely because he brought me this beautiful bunch of flowers and it was such a surprise. So it was really nice. And then he cleaned up and he did all the dishes. So then I remember that he did all the dishes. And then we had a nice cup of tea this morning. And then, you know, like all these, he watered all the plants. And so there's all these, I just recall all the lovely things he does to make our lives better. But that's only because I live on my own. I mean, it's just the two of us and I don't have a lot of interactions with people. So
well it's very similar to, you know, you asked me earlier and I talked about stockpiling wins, right? It's very, very similar exercise that you go through. So I can relate to that. And I think it's a very useful tool to practice using. So I think that's wonderful. So that's awesome.
And none of those meditation practices took any time at all.
Got you. No, you're right. You're right. They're easy. We can do it any aspects. It doesn't take much, and the busiest of lifestyles can handle those. That's awesome.
Totally.
I want to. So first off, Wendy, this has been such a fabulous chat. I really appreciate it. And one last thing I wanted to ask you about, and I know you do a lot of work with senior leaders and managers, and in sort of the business setting. One of the things that you've touched on. I think when you first reached out to me, the one thing I do remember, and I made a point because I thought it was really powerful, is you talked about focusing on turning negatives into supercharged positives. I wonder if you can just elaborate on that, because I just think that is such a wonderful take on how you transform people's lives.
Yeah, so it's similar to everything else. So you talked before about, these peaks and troughs.
Yes.
And when in those troughs, actually, when it goes kind of all pear-shaped and horrible, a bit like my interaction with the woman last night, it's a really lovely opportunity to learn. And if you don't have the bad stuff, actually, you're not able to learn. And that's what turns it around into being a positive.
Right.
Because if everything is always smooth sailing, you actually don't get an opportunity to develop as a person. So I think we've kind of said the same sort of thing. Basically, it's not about denying what is there. It's not about it's really taking stock of what is already good in life.
Right.
Learning resilience with the way that you deal with emotions. And learning to integrate feedback, which can feel really harsh at the time, but is actually really positive. So it's very subtle.
Right.
But a bit like my kind of working with the anger, like I completely transformed. My long-term goal is to find a way to love everybody. That's my long-term goal.
Love it.
And I did that because when I was a child, I was deeply lonely. And on the side of the church, it said, Jesus loves everyone, everybody, or everyone. And I thought, well, Jesus is one person. I'm one person. I can find a way to love everybody. Like I was 10 or something, And there's something about recognizing that you're in the poo, you're having a really tough time. You're not having a good time. I would have to say that it's because I've had really quite difficult circumstances. Both my sister and my father died as a child, and I was bullied, and there's sort of a whole lot of other stuff that has happened.
Right.
And it's because of that, and something about my disposition, which is seeking to transform those things. And it's like it gives me energy and power to share that with others. And it helps because I own my own stuff. When somebody comes to me with a problem, my stuff doesn't get in the way because I've already worked with it. So I can put it to the side and I just listen, and then I really hear what the person is saying. Right. So what I've heard throughout this interview is you have a strong desire, and what you really care about is for people to really live positive lives that is full of care and kindness and thoughtfulness. It's about achieving things that are really seem unattainable, but nonetheless kind of you can do it. And I've heard you care that it's okay to have a down moment, but it doesn't last.
Right.
So that's what that we need to kind of recognize everything in order to be able to be the best of ourselves.
Gotcha. Absolutely. So you heard loud and clear. That's exactly it. No, that's my mantra, my mission, my belief. It's all those are my foundational principles of how I live my life and the podcast. And so you absolutely nailed it. So thank you for listening, Wendy. I appreciate that.
It's my pleasure. Look, it's been so lovely to be part of this program. I mean, it's such a delightful conversation. Listen, thank you so much for being with me in my questions, because I'm still playing around with the ideas. Nothing is set, and I appreciate you being willing to put yourself, like it's your show, and I'm kind of asking.
Thank you. I appreciate being asked questions and making me be introspective and challenge some of my thinking. I think those are all positive things, as I said earlier, that allows us to grow, expand, evolve, and just get better. So thank you for that. For our listeners, Wendy, if they want to learn more about you or your work, where can we send them?
So I've got a brand new website, which I'm super delighted with. I've had a fantastic web designer. He's been fantastic. And it's at kindlycutthecrap.com. And I'm also on LinkedIn. There are 2 Wendy Nashes that are around in Australia who are kind of big on LinkedIn in the same sort of area. Yeah. Don't go to the wrong one. Make sure you come to me.
Yeah, for sure.
And if anybody just has a question, feel free to just touch base and let me know. I just say this, my email address is wendy@kindlycutthecrap.com. The web developer told me that the contact box isn't working today. And we've still got a couple of issues where we're all ironing out. So I put up my email address and just contact me, and it's no problem. I work with different people in different places. So I'm used to the time zones for sure. I've lived in different countries. I know how it works. So
that's so amazing. Wendy, this has been such a great chat. I'm glad that we had an opportunity to connect. Thank you for being here, and all the best moving forward, Wendy.
Yeah, you too. I wish you well. I think what you're doing is a beautiful thing. So thank you.
Thank you. Back we are here on the podcast, and I gotta first off send my appreciation and big thanks to Wendy for being here and sharing her sights on introspection and why it's such an important process for us to all go through. I also want to thank her for those great meditation exercises that she shared as well. They're really simple and easy, and we can institute it very easily into our lives. So again, thanks for that, Wendy. When I think back to my conversation that I had with Wendy, she really left us with a lot of great points. But if there's just one thing that I would take from my chat with her, it would be this. Being introspective is a conscious act of self-awareness that involves thinking about and analyzing our own individual thoughts and behaviors. We all have a natural curiosity about ourselves, and oftentimes it's for this reason why we seem to replay our experiences and actions over and over in our heads in hopes of understanding who and how we are. We're clearly the centers of our own attention, and I think many of us can admit to that. And when we self-reflect through the introspection process, we can accept our own imperfections and learn what we can from our failures. Self-introspection, or looking inwards, is an important part of self-awareness and can help people gain insight into their own feelings and behaviors. Hey, listen, if you haven't registered for email notifications of the podcast, please know that you can do so simply by heading over to bestaudaciouslife.com. All you've got to do is enter in your email address, and you'll be alerted every time there's brand new content that comes out. We've sadly reached the end of another episode of the Audacious Living Podcast, and as always, I want to send my thanks and appreciation to our lovers of Audacious. Your tremendous support is always appreciated, and the ongoing, it just keeps us going. And I would also ask your indulgence if you head over to your favorite podcast listening platform, enter in a rating, preferably a 5-star, and a comment. That would also be greatly appreciated. Until next time, stay safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.